What is up, Gangrene Nation, Gotham City, all my Jets fans? It is Thomas Christopher, aka Tommy Jets, and I am here with my colleague Brandyn Pokrass in the premiere episode of the Inner City Jets podcast. Hey, you guys got to check out Brandyn. He does amazing stuff with JetsXFactor. He's an up-and-coming beat writer, one of the most talented people in the Jets community by far. He also works for my company at the League Winners as an FAU beat writer, and we're about to be some Rutgers guys too. Brandyn, how you doing, brother?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me on today and ready to talk Jets because, first preseason games coming up. Got the green and white scrimmage tomorrow. Lots of fun stuff and lots of new things we will find out soon about this team.
Yeah, I gotta love it. It's going to be interesting. I know everybody's really looking forward to seeing a healthy Aaron Rodgers season. Now, Brandyn, you've been to a ton of these practices. You have a good gist of what you're seeing. I really trust your eye of talent. Now, who have been the most impressive players on the Jets so far during camp that have stood out to you?
So I think I'd be remiss to start anywhere than outside of Garrett Wilson and Aaron Rodgers. I mean, that connection has been thriving. It was great during OTAs, and they were making a lot of things work, but you're seeing how they took the progress they made in OTAs, or I'd say getting back up to speed with where they were last season, and it's progressing week after week after week, day after day, to the point now where, it feels like every single day there's a tweet about Garrett Wilson touchdown pass from Aaron Rodgers. Today, Garrett Wilson, long touchdown pass from Aaron Rodgers, deep pass down the field. Other times, he's beating DJ Reed. He's beat Sauce Gardner a handful of times. He's beating whoever is lined up against him. If all things break right for the Jets, and specifically these two, you're probably looking at Garrett Wilson vaulting himself into that pantheon of the best wide receivers in the league. Outside the obvious, though, I'd say that Braylon Allen has continued to shine. I really enjoy his running style, how he looks so smooth for someone that's so big. The fact that he just gets downhill, there's no wasted movement. He's willing to run through his own teammates as he did with Tony Adams. And more importantly, he's shown really good receiving footwork. He's shown good hands. He's shown fluidity in his routes, which is something that wasn't really known during his time at Wisconsin. So I think the fact that you're seeing all that in camp and that it wasn't just an OTA flash in the pan, you're probably looking at your RB2 for the New York Jets. Working beyond them, I've personally liked what I've seen from Eric Watts. I think he has a really good shot to stick on this 53-man roster. And then the linebackers. My personal favorite has been Jamie Sherwood, but Zaire Barnes has looked better. Sam McGuavon has looked better. Chaz Surratt has looked pretty good. That's a unit that might be sneaky deep. And then to finish out, the standouts, Quantez Stiggers, very similar to Garrett, very similar to Braylon Allen. He's continuing his work from a great OTA into training camp. And yeah, he's not going to win every single rep, but the reps he's winning right off the bat as a rookie, very impressive to see.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I know me and you have talked about Braylon Allen in person and how I've really loved him. I don't think Wisconsin did him too many favors playing in that spread offense. So I'm really excited to see how he looks in the Jets offense because it's totally different. And I think we were all a little surprised to see his receiving work. I love the Stiggers call out as well. I actually had a little question for you. Do you think that the Jets end up feeling comfortable enough, depending on the progress of Stiggers, that they let Reed go and have him be that second cornerback on the outside?
I do, but I also think that, and I forgot to mention him, another guy's progress probably plays a role into this. Jarek Bernard-Converse has taken a lot of steps forward, and he has looked really good during camp. He's had some of the best pass breakups out of any cornerback, and that's including Michael Carter, DJ Reed, and Sauce Gardner. So I think when you look at it like that, the Jets might see it as, hey, we might have two guys for the price of one, in the sense of either JBC or Stiggers or a combination of both could probably get us to a point where they're not feeling the DJ Reed absence as much. And then I personally would agree with that because that gives you more money to sign Michael Carter. He's not going to be as expensive as a slot guy compared to an outside guy. DJ Reed's approaching 30 years old. A lot of things just make sense if Stiggers and JBC are the guys that they've shown, or at least majority of what they've shown during camp. Because look, if you have the same staff, and that's a big if, depending on this year, they've shown a great ability to develop defensive talent. Why can't JBC and Stiggers become the next starting corners and really good corners for the Jets?
No, I completely agree. And I think their development's interesting because it places out, a couple other guys that kind of bode into this next question I wanted to ask you is about potential surprise camp cuts. Not everyone's going to make the roster, obviously, and some of them will be surprises. Who do you think will end up being, getting the short end of the stick there, unfortunately?
I think that the guy that should jump to everyone's top of the list should be Michael Clemens. And I understand that the Jets really like him, but he hasn't shown much in the sense of a pass rush. Hasn't shown that he can consistently get after the passer against the best offensive lineman. Now, as a run stopper, as someone playing against the run, he's looked good. He's chased down a few ball carriers. He looks good with his pursuit angles. But if you're going to be at that starting caliber, you need to be able to make some semblance of an impact as a pass rusher, not just be a complete zero. Because, the Jets have Jermaine Johnson. The Jets have Will McDonald. They most likely will have Haason Reddick in the next week or so. But the Jets love to rotate. They love to get all their different guys on the field. If a guy like, for example, Eric Watts has a camp where he shows run stop ability, but a higher pass rush ceiling than Clemens, I'd personally take Watts. If Takk McKinley shows a much higher ceiling than Clemens, I'd take McKinley. Same goes for Braden McGregor. It's just a matter of you want to have the most versatile and best group at every single position for a team that's competing for playoffs, for championships. You can't just hold on to the draft pick status. I know the Jets have been known to do this, specifically with Ashton Davis before he actually turned into a productive player and started to take those steps forward, because he's actually pretty good now. But you can't, for example, cut Watts, cut McGregor, cut McKinley simply because, Clemens was our draft guy. If those guys that are the UDFAs or the bottom end free agent signings are better than Clemens, just keep the overall talent.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And with the way that defensive line is in that front seven for the Jets, it's already competitive enough where I think they have to reach on ceiling for those type of players. And if he's not producing that ceiling as a pass rusher, the run defense is good, but we have, as you alluded to, we have to see a semblance of a pass rushing attack from a guy who's going to be playing an important part if he wants to be, a part of this Jets defense. So I really love that pick. I think that's a great one. Not too many people are really realizing that right now, that Clemens could be on the chopping block. Another thing I wanted to discuss with you is, the NFL adapted the XFL kickoff situation. Tarik Cohen suddenly retired from the NFL, so now he's out of the picture for the Jets as the return group. Who do you kind of see taking over those returner responsibilities for the team this year?
Isn't that the question of the day, right? Because I feel like Cohen, in a sense, was the guy. Other guys were going to challenge, but he was the one where he had that return experience, and with the new rules, he said it himself in his press conference. The rules were tailored for him. With him out of the picture now, I think a guy like Malachi Corley would make a lot of sense. I think he's also very well suited for reading blocks and bouncing off tacklers and making plays happen. The problem there is the Jets probably want Malachi Corley to be their number 3 receiver and to use him more on the offensive side of the ball. So are they going to risk that injury to one of their most important offensive players? I'm not 100% sure. It depends how that wide receiver depth chart shakes out, and that's something we'll have to see over the next few weeks. Xavier Gipson seems like another contender. I personally worry about his ability to read blocks. He doesn't have that same mass as Malachi Corley. So where I'm personally going is either a speedy wideout or one of the running backs. So essentially, that would mean Isaiah Davis, who I think would be a great fit. Israel Abanikanda, who has yet to work on that drill from what I've seen, but with Cohen's absence, maybe that changes now. And a guy like Tyler Harrell, who I personally think looked really explosive while working in drills at kickoff. And then there might be some guys that we don't think about yet. I mean, Brandon Codrington was working back there. Maybe they put Xavier Valde back there. We even saw a sprinkling of Braylon Allen back there, which would be really interesting. But it's one of the things that I'm watching a lot more now because it felt like, this thing was kind of set in stone. It's either going to be Gibson or Cohen. Now it kind of feels like the doors are wide open. And along with a few other positions, this is one of the main roles I'm watching, mainly due to how the rules are now.
Yeah, I think kind of seeing that the Hall of Fame game, that like only singular line of defense. I think somebody with the proper amount of speed, ball carrier vision, and just overall finesse can really do a lot of damage for their team this season. And I really love the Davis call out. If he can't get a shot on the offense between Allen and Hall, a great way to utilize him is on the kickoffs, which I really like to see. I'm really interested to see how that plays out as well. Now, me and you were actually at this practice where Joe Tippmann had a lot of high snaps. He's had some issues throughout practice so far. It seems to have dialed down, thankfully, in the past two practices. And there's been a couple other little issues. But do you think the offensive line, it's kind of trending between Jet fans right now. Do you think the offensive line is worth worrying about, and specifically Tippmann?
Not in the slightest. We have not even seen them work in a live game setting yet. Team drills are very different to a live game setting. And you got to remember, this is the first week of pads. It doesn't feel like it. It's been a very long week, but it's the first week of pads. They're only going to get more comfortable and understand the playbook more and understand their responsibilities more. If they understand it less, then that player was never meant to be good in the first place. But a guy like Joe Tippmann, who is constantly around Aaron Rodgers, Rodgers is constantly in his ear, constantly pushing him to be better. That's the type of makeup in a player that I don't doubt them. Now, maybe there's something else there. Maybe the yips actually do pop up. And in a week or two, we're talking about, hey, the Jets need to go after a veteran center. But you got to let things play out a little bit. You're not going to see the final product of the Jets offense on August 1st or August 2nd. Or July 30th, and you shouldn't be making full scale, the Jets are in trouble, Joe Tippmann's horrible, this early in the summer. There's a lot of runway left. I know it doesn't seem like it. There is. They haven't even played their first preseason game yet. My biggest thing would be, let things play out. Let's see how this unit meshes together. And worst case scenario, if you have to pick up a center, that's really not the end of the world.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it's interesting because, I was a little bit worried, but as I said, it's the first week of practice with pads on. Next week, this upcoming week, it's already showing that there is that difference already happening. I think the other day he had like one or two high snaps. And I from what I've seen from beat reporters today for today's practice, he hadn't had an issue with that at all. So as long as that continues to happen, like we know Tippmann's a good blocker. The only thing that he's had issues with as far as the center position is he can occasionally have a high snap. And as Aaron Rodgers alluded to, like if he's going to have a couple of high snaps, I'm going to chew him out. And I love that response from Aaron Rodgers. It's kind of like the same thing of how people are making a big deal out of that Garrett Wilson, Aaron Rodgers stuff too. Just because it's the offseason, a lot of stuff is kind of getting played up over the top. And sometimes guys just have to work through their struggles. Like you've played sports, I've played sports. Sometimes you go through a rut and it just takes you a couple times before you get out of that rut. And it happens. Some guys can't, but I don't think we'll see that issue with Tippmann, at least hopefully not. I mean, I don't know. I know nobody wants to see that as a Jets fan, especially this season, a high snap getting Aaron Rodgers killed. We don't need a playback of 2023. But it leads me to kind of another question I have. So about camp is Haason Reddick has not shown up yet. That he got traded to the Jets as basically a Bryce Huff replacement, so to speak, more or less. Apparently the Jets were willing to guarantee parts of his contract that were unguaranteed, starting to do a type of re-signing. He agreed to this stuff, said he was going to show up in camp, never showed up in camp, still hasn't showed up in camp. How concerned are you with that as we do start to get to these joint practices and preseason games?
So I think the best way to illustrate it is like race markers, and each, like, how in it, like, for example, a NASCAR race, you have the marker for the final lap. So I'll use that to illustrate my level and how I've gone. So basically, at the beginning, I was like, all right, if he doesn't report to training camp, I'm a bit worried. Doesn't report to training camp. I said earlier this week, if he doesn't report by the end of this week, I'm a bit more worried. We hit that marker. The final marker for me to be actually panicked is if he is not there for the joint practice, or is not there before the joint practice, because then you're getting to a point where one of your best edge rushers, if not your best edge rusher, is not there for your first preseason game, which means that ramp up is taking that much longer now. If you get to the second preseason game, now that ramp up might interfere with that first game. You get to the third preseason game, you're in trouble. So it's one of those things that I've been adamant. Both sides need each other. The Jets need Reddick to get to where they want to be this year. Division champs, competing for the AFC title, competing for a Super Bowl. You don't get that without, in my opinion, the pass rush of Haason Reddick. On the flip side, Reddick needs to show up so he can get paid. If Reddick doesn't play this year, teams aren't going to shell out money for a guy that is 30 years old and just took a complete year off of football. Reddick is going to be back, but these sides need to mend the fence so they can both get as much out of it as possible, because the Jets don't want to lose Reddick's production, and Reddick doesn't want to lose his production because that means he loses dollars on that next contract.
Yeah, and listen, as much as Reddick, says he's ready and doing all this preparation, away from the Jets facility, we know that there's a difference between training with your personal trainer and the guys you're training with. Because, let's face it, a lot of the guys he's probably training with now, they're in camp. So he's probably doing stuff solo. And it's not the same as hitting guys in an NFL environment, especially, as we get closer to the season. It's something I'm worried about. I know the other guys aren't, and frankly, I'm not surprised they aren't worried, because they haven't played with him before. To them, it's not really a huge issue, probably in their eyes. But hopefully, once he comes to camp, like, that difference is shown on the field. But if he doesn't come to camp, Will McDonald probably is the guy who steps up in that situation. Do you have faith in a Will McDonald second year kind of blossoming the same way that Jermaine Johnson did? Or do you think that with or without Reddick that he's capable of doing that? Or do you think it's more of we have to continue to wait and see on his progress?
I think it's a very interesting parallel with Reddick and McDonald, because with Reddick, edge rusher for a veteran like him, you don't really need as much of a ramp up period, right? This guy that's had double-digit sacks for four straight seasons. He's someone that's going to come in the camp. He's going to know how to get his job done. He's a veteran, as Salah has talked about. He's going to be prepared for the season. On the flip side, McDonald needs all the reps possible. And I think it's kind of a silver lining that Reddick isn't here, because now you're going to truly see where is McDonald at heading into this year. I personally think that at a minimum, he should be in that Bryce Huff role. Your assassin on third downs, where you bring him in and you tell him just get after the quarterback, because you have the luxury of having Haason Reddick. You have the luxury of having Jermaine Johnson and Quinn Williams. You don't have to rely on McDonald as, the 3-down run stopper and pass rush threat. I think he could get to a point where he's a very good pass rusher, and isn't a complete liability against the run. I think he's shown improvements against the run. He had a really good run stuff in one of the training camp practices. I just think it's in the Jets' best interest to not throw him completely in the fire and be like, you have to do everything right off the bat now. Because then if he falters, who do you have behind him?
Right, not much depth right now behind that. He's supposed to be the depth guy, and I think that's where I agree with you. I think that's the best spot for him to be on this Jets defense, especially in that rotational lineman role where Saleh likes to have those guys just pin their ears back and go straight after their target. They don't have to do much thinking on that end, and I think that's where McDonald can really strive. I believe it was C.J. Mosley who spoke about all the arsenal that McDonald has added to his attacks on linemen. So I'm really interested to see that, especially play out if, God forbid, we don't get Reddick during the season. I'm really interested to see how that works out. I hope the kid does well, but I agree. I think he should take a less important role in the Jets defense this season while they're contending. It's tough to kind of trust a guy like that in a season with as big aspirations as the Jets have. Let's let him work his way to prove himself, and let's not throw him into that fire, so to speak, as you alluded to. But Brandyn, hey man, I really appreciate you getting in here. I really want everybody to check out Brandyn Pokrass. Okay, it's at BPOK24 on Twitter. He is a JetsX beat writer. He is an FAU beat writer for the league winners, and he covers Rutgers as well. He is one of the most intelligent people in the NFL community. Really, I love this kid to death. He does an amazing job. I want everybody to make sure to check him out. And Brandyn, is there anything final that you would like to say to any fans watching?
Yeah, absolutely. So, heading towards the green and white scrimmage, heading towards the preseason, just remember there's going to be ups, there's going to be downs. Don't take everything that happens right off the bat as, oh, we're screwed or it's going to be great. Enjoy the ride and really just take stock of where this team's at, because where they start isn't necessarily going to be where they finish.
I love that. That's the words of wisdom right there. And, as always, it's Tommy Jets, Thomas CP_NFL on Twitter. This is the Inner City Jets. Brandyn, thank you so much for coming, brother. I really appreciate you.
Of course. Thank you for your time.